So the Spino TLC update, I love it. But... hello! So, how is everybody enjoying the update? Personally, I really like the update. I like about 95% of the changes in this update. Some things have been taken away and reduced and increased. We've also got the new Spino TLC. The Spino TLC looks amazing, has a pretty interesting direction that it's gone with his kit, along with a new mechanic, which is the first version of it in-game, and I hope that goes a little bit further into future TLCs or additions to the game. But, there's the key word, but, there was one thing, obviously, that anybody who's watched this channel for long enough knows that I'm going to have quite a bit of a problem with, but I'm going to give you a little bit, well, a way bigger explanation of why I would have a problem with that thing that you know that I have a problem with. This video is mainly talking and less about gameplay, so if you're not here for, listening to me talk and you'd rather have some gameplay, well, I'm sure you could probably find some other, gameplay videos on the channel, and I hope you enjoy them. I'll try and get onto a video, some actual gameplay video after I've made this one. I will try and have it out in like 2 days. This has actually been a pain in the backside to actually make today, just due to, well, editing on a PlayStation. It's very slow. So, today I'll be talking, of course, about Spino, in terms of its kit and, what the abilities and the new stuff is actually, what it's most suited for. And then also I'll be talking about a couple of the balance changes and the reason why I think those balance changes happened in the first place. I'm not going into any details of any specific thing overall, but more the idea of why changes happen in the way that they happen. And then finished up, I'll be talking about the but for this update. And with that out of the way, I've got a very sore throat at this moment. I hope you all enjoy. So for Spino, I actually really like its kit and find it interesting, just because it goes the opposite direction of pretty much most of the other Apexes, except for bars, in which that all of those other Apexes are more offense-based. Or, they excel at killing things their own size, but then they struggle against packs of smaller things. Like, say, a pack of Serras is harder for them to deal with than, say, I don't know, another Rex. But then, in Spino's case, it's kind of flipped that on its head. It's not as strong at fighting other Apexes, in my opinion, unless you're a godlike player, unlike me. But then, if you come across, say, a pack of Serras, well, you're gonna have an easier time defending yourself than a Rex would.
Nice.
So, how about we get into the abilities? So, to start off on Spinosaurus, we have this head ability called Lunging Snap. This is a choice that you can make on your head slot, and what it does is that in water, you will do a dash forward, and also a bite. It does a considerable amount more damage if you are underwater while using it to land that bite, but then if you are on land, it kind of just works as a normal bite with a longer cooldown. So this is one of the options you could pick if you want to actually focus on your water combat playstyle. Next up we have Snapjaw, which is practically just Deinonychus's Sever Tendon. If you hit a target with it, then they get slowed down by 2% per stack. If you're wet, you'll do 4%, but this only stacks up to 10% of Sliced. Oh yeah, that's the status name, by the way, Sliced. Same as Deinonychus. It's most used in terms of how I've seen it whenever I'm seeing like a horde of Spinos. It doesn't really help you actually catch anything other than other Spinos, though, I will be fair. Simple reason, as, well, Spino's pretty damn slow, a lot slower than all of the other Apexes, and if you can make something that's the same speed as you slower than you, well, obviously that's the thing it's going to be most effective on, really. Next up, we'll be looking at the tail slot, and let's start with Undertow. Swing your tail to create a water vortex that creates a medium area of effect, damaging all nearby dinosaurs and pulling players towards you. Usable on land as a normal area of effect attack, dealing small knockback. Now this is really interesting to me, as this is the first iteration of not just knockback and AoE, but this is the first thing that actually pulls people in. And I'm wondering where they could go with that in the future for any of the other aquatics that are going to be made in-game. It's a little jank right now, as, you know, any new thing is going to need some work, you know, to optimize it. Maybe give, you know, some way to follow up afterwards for this particular attack in the water, but otherwise, it's really cool in concept. What can I say? Obviously, everything can be improved, but I like the idea. But one of my favorite things about this ability here is that it's actually a dual nature ability. It's like two abilities in one. If you're in water, you've got this big, cool, new mechanic that actually pulls people in, and it's super flashy, and it's made for the water. It's cool. But then if you're on land, it's an AoE, like you're a boss, right?
This is
Or
my
an
water.
animal doing a tail slam.
These are my
And I
waters.
kind of like that, and I would kind of like to see that on more playables, I can't lie. I would love to see that on more playables. As Undertow wasn't the only thing that got this, it was also Sweep, in which it's a more simplified version. It's basically a tail attack that does a lot of damage for a tail attack, but it does have a big caveat for it. If you're on land, you're dealing this high damage, but you have no knockback. If you are in water, then it deals knockback along with the good damage. Simple, but still a dual nature ability. And so next up in the claw slot we have Drench Strike, which kind of works like a normal claw attack, but with quite a longer cooldown, but then also deals a lot more damage if you are wet. But then if you're dry, you end up actually debuffing their speed, you know, adding a stack of sliced. So yet again, another dual nature ability. I love it. It's kind of more on-demand kind of damage, and is pretty reliable to actually count on using it. But if you're looking for some flashiness, well, look no further than Claw Slam. This is the full-on, look cool, badass kind of moment kind of ability. You slam your claws into the ground repeatedly, dealing damage in an area of effect, continuously drains stamina while active, deals knockback, and can be interrupted by other knockback. Now overall, it is just what it reads on the tin. It is super cool looking, it's so dramatic, you lay into someone, you keep smashing your hand down on the ground, and they're kind of just forced to just take it. They can't really do anything unless they hit you with some knockback to stop your attack in the first place. But you can get past that weakness of the ability with another ability that I'll be talking about soon. So, next. They also ended up giving it Nictitating Membrane as pretty much its intrinsic value, which also then has the same effect as Suko for being able to see fish or track down fish from a mile away. So now on to passive. So Waterborne. While wet on land, gain up to 3 times acceleration and up to 10% armor based on your wetness amount. Makes you dry out slower outside of water, but then you also get 15% increased stamina recovery while swimming. So, this is useful for those times where you kind of want to fight along the shoreline against something that is silly enough to fight you along the shoreline instead of just walking away, since they know or at least they should know that they'll never actually be able to get you, since you can just run into water and be safe. Then next up we have Shockwave, same as Bars and Anno, more range on your AoE, less damage to group members. And then after that we have Patient Lurking, which it's all fully focused on water combat. You get oxygen faster, you drain it slower, and you do more damage underwater. So next up, the leg slot, Tide Strider. You gain more stamina whenever you're wet on land. It's very good. And then the next one, Lunge. Lunge forward when in water, pretty much the same as Duck, the same as Suko. Yeah, it's there. And so next up, we have Dazing Bellows. Pretty much just makes all your AoE attacks now apply dazed, which ends up actually stopping people from actually doing any attacks, and it also slows them down a little bit. It's a good opening to get damage out, and is very, very useful when you combine this with Claw Slam. Now, the reason is because as you remember, if you get hit with a little bit of AoE while using Claw Slam, it'll cancel the entire attack, and then you've got to wait like 20 seconds. But if you end up actually having Dazing Bellows active, and then hitting someone with Claw Slam, it allows you to actually get the entire attack off, pretty much for free, and then you can follow up with whatever attacks afterwards, or you can just get away, right? Next up, we have Rallying Call, which, what can I say other than it's just the same as Bars Boldia. That's not a good or a bad thing, it's just really useful. It kind of fits since Spino I see her as more of a defensive playable. But yeah, just try it. Next up, let's have a look at the hide. Streamline. So, simple to explain, more swim speed, faster healing while underwater. Very useful whenever you're dealing with other Spinos that are more land-focused, as you'll outmaneuver them in the water, and then if they try to wait you out and try to heal, well, you'll heal faster than
Spinos
them.
is quite
Next up, we have Solar Powered, which is useful both in water and on land. You gain a ton of stamina recovery during the day, and at night you gain some armor. Cool. Combine it with other stamina regen things for big funny. And so next up, Bright Sail. Increase your armor by up to 15% if afflicted with any sort of status like Bleed, Venom, Toxin, Poison, or Fracture. Scales based on the status amount and does not stack with multiple status effects. In other words, if you're up against, say, a Titan, or you have a Meg coming after you, the more status they build up on you, or if a Rex fractures you, you'll gain some armor to survive that, whatever you're going through. Doesn't really help in killing anything, but helps you survive. More defensive playable. Now, I like defensive concept. In other words, for me personally, I haven't got to kill everything in a 10-mile radius in order for me to be having fun. Sometimes, just being able to actually get away is actually more fun for me than actually getting a kill. Now, almost every offensive tool can be used defensively. Example, say a Rex Bite is a offensive tool, yet if you try to defend yourself against something, you hit them with that bite, it'll push them away. They don't want to take that damage. It's a defensive tool. But in Spino's case, it's mainly based around defense. A big wide sweeping tail to cover as much area as possible from small things that may be coming after you, paired with, AoE that can be used to deal with those packs of small things, whereas all of the other Apexes are pretty much focusing, they've kind of got to focus one at a time, whereas Spino just, it's like a battleship. It hits in all directions.
I can't
but just
get
not as
past
hard
the
as all of the other Apexes.
I'm dead. Wait, what did I even die to? Oh, a detonate. Okay, detonate I died to.
Now, I do want to get into a bit of balance talk, but before I actually do, I need to say this first. Any changes that Alderaan make, it's because of whatever is happening on official servers. That's what they mainly care about. Those are the servers they run. That is their target. Okay, they're not aiming for whatever, could happen on a community server, because the community server owners could change the stats in whatever way that their community suggests, or whatever way that the server owner wants in the first place. And the changes that, Alderaan make towards any of the playables, being that it's focused on a server that has 0 gameplay rules. You can play however you want. Obviously, don't swear and say any slurs in chat, otherwise you deserve a ban. Silly Billy. So here we go. So we had a lot of balance changes in this update. I don't really want to go through them all. They're kind of flashing on screen a little bit right here, but if you ever want to actually get the details on everything, you might as well just go watch a Veloci video, because he covers it all. But the biggest change in this update is undoubtedly the change to Apexes. But what did they do? Well, Apexes got squishier, and not just a bit squishier, a lot squishier. And the reason is because before this update, before the actual patch, we had pretty much scaling in terms of health, pretty much like this. The one on the bottom is our current patch, where it's a nice, just like a slide almost, right? In terms of you get bigger, and you're a bit bulkier. Sounds cool. Whereas then, before the patch, it was pretty much that everything kind of, got a little bit tankier as you got a bit bigger, but then all of a sudden, apexes were just pretty much... It turned this entire graph into more of a gun instead of a bell curve, as it should be. And I know there's the concern that, oh, well, this isn't very realistic. Well, realism isn't very fun in terms of balance for any game. Especially when a game, has a version that has 0 rules. You remember what I was saying at the beginning of this part? That the target for Alderon's changes is official servers, which has 0 rules. And this is also the same argument that I'm trying to also make, the problems that solo players have on official servers. They get mobbed by multiple people. It's very common, okay? And I'm sure it sucks. It sucks if you get mobbed by multiple people, no matter who you are. It's gonna feel bad. It's gonna be a lot harder for you. Obviously, you can do something with a bit of skill and stuff like that. I can't, because I'm, not that great of a player. But some people out there, they prefer it.
Yeah, they're all
and I'm gonna use this same analogy here, or argument for solo players. I'm also going to apply this to apexes because it works in the same way. Now, the problem I keep hearing is, why can't we make solo players stronger? Well, the issue with that is that with officials being pretty much, there's a lot of people with like a mega pack or a large group, right? If you make a solo person stronger, what that does is that all of those people in a mega pack or, a large group can actually just use the strength that solo players get. And now you've made that mega pack a lot stronger. Way stronger than, the buff that the solo person got. Because now that solo person, oh yeah, they're a bit stronger. But now that mega pack is stronger times 10. Because they got 10 people with that solo strength. And this is also the same issue that we had for apexes before this patch. Because apexes were so bulky before, what that led people to do on these official servers, the target of, what Alderon make changes for, they would just do the exact same thing. The people on, in the giant groups and megapacks and all that, they'd just stack a ton of apexes. They'd get as many as they could, as long as they could keep throwing health at you. It was good. It was really not very fun to deal with. It was very satisfying if you managed to beat them, but God, if you beat them, you worked for it. Either that, or, I don't want to be mean, but they might have been less experienced players, or... I like to, I'm kind of sugarcoating it a little bit, but you get what I'm saying? But that's not all they've done for big, changes for the balance. They also ended up making a change to group slot limits, changing it from 10 to 12, which ends up actually adding quite a lot of pretty interesting combos for this game. And for them to have, done this on the same kind of patch where they ended up actually nerfing the bulkiness of apexes, it means that, say if you are a group of 4 people, instead of, you choosing to have, say, 4 Rexes, instead you could actually all be in the same group, and then maybe try something like 1 Rex, 2 Dasps, and a Denon. The Denon can actually provide defensive buffs for everything. The Dasps can, choose whether they want to focus on keeping stuff bone broken for the Rex to catch up, or it can also just buff the damage of the Rex with Tyrant's Roar, and then the Rex is obviously just going to do Rex things. In other words, Om Nom. Or on the other end, you could try out EO. I know EO is not in the best place right now among apexes, but just as an example, you could try out an EO, 1 Alb, and then obviously 2 Styras. And with this example in particular, you pretty much get 30% armor and damage to all 4 of those things right there. Or you could remove one of these Styras and replace them with 2 Struthies, in which then Struthi has a bunch of different, calls and buffs that it can use to actually, buff up the team, make it stronger yet again. It's an opportunity. Whereas a lot of groups before, they would have just gone you know, those all 4 of those people would have gone 4 EOs or 4 Rexes, 4 Ducks, 4 Spinos or whatever like that. But now that they're squishier, you know, they're not as attractive. But what is attractive then, you know, along with that happened at the same time, is now that they can do more with whatever their group size limit is. They can get some interesting combos. They can get mechanics into their gameplay instead of, oh, I'm going to go and just throw wrecking balls at you until I run out of them. Which is what official servers generally has been for the longest time. All in all, I think the tiers of dinos being brought closer together, in which most of them were close together. It was just apexes that were just, you know, they were just giant stat walls. You just, you know, the groups just all stacked on top of each other and just threw at you. And maybe like 1 or 2 small guys just so that the big guys could actually catch up, right? That's pretty much all they used the small guys for. But I'm also not going to actually talk about the balance of, you know, dinos inside the same tier. So, say, like, an Aloe versus an Alb. I'm not going to talk on the balance between that. You know, one might be way stronger than the other, or it might just be easier to learn than the other, or just accessibility. What I usually like to say is find something you enjoy. Not something that is, you know, the best. That's what I really... That's like my head thought, usually. Like, no matter how bad Ramperinkus is, I'll move on to this soon. Because, you know, no matter how bad it is, if that's what you enjoy, that's what you enjoy. You know? You don't need to throw it in the bin because it's not strong anymore, right? It may not be as fun as before, but if that's what you enjoy, that's just what you enjoy. But, since I mentioned Ramperinkus, I think I want to actually give my 2 cents on the one balance change that I actually care about. Everything else, yeah, I'll leave that to the people who actually play them, but for me, it's Ramperinkus, as you all know. Ramperinkus has been losing at least 1 interaction almost every single patch for the past several patches. Now let me explain why from the start. So, Ramperinkus ended up releasing. It had 0 damage, it had only utility. Its whole focus was around either making group mates stronger or a target weaker. It also had some cool utility options like, say, Plague Carrier, which ended up making it so that any time you pounced an enemy, they starved out quicker. Not long ago, they ended up actually buffing Plague Carrier into actually having a way stronger impact in terms of starving people out way faster, so long as the ramp ended up staying pounced. And to accompany that made it very, very scary, is it could pretty much get, you know, from 0 stamina to full stamina within about 5 seconds by landing and sleeping. By the time that the animation ended up ending, for you to actually, you know, start sleeping, you'd already have full stamina. You could just get straight back up right away. And along with that then, you ended up just pouncing the thing that you wanted to plague in the first place again. It was kind of a pain to a lot of people, and I could understand the frustration at the time. The problem was that ramp could pretty much just starve out any player that didn't have any ability to actually hit the ramp off of its side, making it so that the ramp just stayed there, just, you know, never leaving it alone. It was a nightmare for any solo player that had a ramp that was angry at them. So what happened then? Well, then a lot of dinos ended up getting TLCs, and in those TLCs they ended up getting kits where they ended up having abilities that could hit pouncers. In other words, so AoE, any attack with tail slams, stuff like that. This does limit ramp's options for actual targets that they can pounce if, you know, the target ends up having an ability that can hit the ramp off of them. Well, then the ramp isn't going to want to pounce them and try and mess with them, right? It's kind of like just asking to die at that point. And this is fair. You can't have it all. Sometimes it was the case that ramp could interact with something that couldn't interact back. So making it so that things can actually interact back with the ramp if they pick the stuff to actually deal with the ramp on its side. This is fair. You know, the ramp should be punished if it ends up jumping on and getting itself killed. Then we had this little thing right here called Strong Grip. And what Strong Grip does, it's intrinsic to all pouncers, and what it does is it gives you a bunch of armor, making it so that you can tank an ungodly amount of damage whenever you're pounced. You know, basically for 10 seconds. It decays as the timer goes down, but hey, it's still pretty damn good, in a way. Not good for Ramp, though. And my reason for this is that Ramp has one intrinsic passive, the same as Deinonychus, called Lucky Feather. So whenever you're above 40% health, and you end up actually taking fatal damage, in other words, say like a stomp from an Amaga, or say a bite from any sort of Apex, you end up just actually surviving that hit, but this ends up consuming the Lucky Feather, in which it now goes on cooldown, and now you no longer have a safety net. So you could choose to go back in again, but you're kind of playing with fire at that point. And if you end up dying and getting hit by anything without your Lucky Feather, well, that was your choice to go in. Otherwise, you can always just get out of the fight and just wait. Meaning that the person that you were bothering and activated your Lucky Feather no longer has to worry about you, at least for the duration of your cooldown. But what Strong Grip does then, it gives you a ton of armor, so you take way less damage, meaning that, say if an Apex ends up biting you on the side of another Apex that you're buffing or debuffing, then that means that you just tank that hit, but because of the size of Ramp and it's so small, it takes so much damage normally. And so, with that armor, it ends up putting you more in danger because it takes you below that, you know, Lucky Feather threshold, that you end up just ready to die on the next hit. I wouldn't say get rid of Strong Grip overall, but at least for Ramp. It doesn't really have a rush to deal damage, and so doesn't really need that tankiness in order to gain time in order to do damage. Instead, it more needs to be able to rely on that safety net, seeing as pretty much without Lucky Feather in the first place, it would just die to one hit no matter what. This one thing is pretty much what has made it extremely hard for Plague to actually be effective against groups, other than, you know, actual friendship itself, because, you know, power of friendship, always the strongest ability in game. But what ends up happening is, you know, you hop on anybody inside of a group, and then they all bite that one thing at the same time. The first hit has brought you below 40% health. The second hit, which happened in the same, like, millisecond, ended up actually just killing you. So, no more pouncing groups. In other words, let's just stick to, you know, a solo person and try and plague them out, shall we? Well, now the issue there is that now with the stamina generalization and Ramp having way lower stam regen compared to before, which is fair, the only problem I have is it's kept on the same standard as the Raptors, which can actually deal damage and keep people in combat. The Ramp ends up actually spending almost double the amount of time actually getting stamina as it does actually plaguing something. So, with this, plaguing something, even a solo player, is kind of out the window, and yeah, you're kind of wasting your time. So we aren't really going to be plaguing any more people unless you have enough ramps to do so, and you just take turns. When one person gets stamina, another person hops on, then they get stamina, another person hops on. So what's left? Well, we can have some pretty underestimated yet scary combos in terms of playing ramp with another bleeder. Say like a Tyranno Titan, or Concavinator, or perhaps Allos. They add a bunch of bleed, and then Ramp can use this wonderful little ability called Scav Picker. And what Scav Picker is it's an ability in which whenever you pounce to a target, you can reduce how fast they heal off any sort of bleed damage. In other words, doubling the amount of time that they spend bleeding for whatever value of bleed they have on, on their playable right now. You can team this up along with, say, any sort of bleeder dino, say like a Concavinator, an Allo, another Tyranno Titan, anything like that. If they deal bleed, it is perfect for this ability, Scav Picker. Now, you would think that the change to stamina regen on Ramp would have made this way harder to actually maintain on a target. But if anything, it just made it more managey. You had to actually think about your stamina, you had to micromanage a bit. So instead of just pouncing onto a target and then doing all of the stacks all at once and then go and getting stamina, instead you would pounce to a target, do maybe 1 or 2 stacks, fly off, get some stamina, then you come back, do another 1 or 2 stacks until they're at max stacks, reducing their bleed healing. As long as you maintained your stamina and you actually looked after it properly, then you would be able to then just come back every 20 seconds and then actually just keep them debuffed, right? You actually had to work to get that debuff on to the target and then maintain it. Or at least it was, as it used to be at 20 seconds of a debuff, now has been moved down to 5 seconds of a debuff. Meaning that after you've stacked up all your stacks of Scav Picker, by the time that you've gone and landed and started to rest, they have pretty much already had that debuff fall off of them. In other words, it is now useless. Purely useless. You've put it on there just for a 5-second jump scare whenever they see their bleed bar go from, you know, just jump up really, really high to pretty much now it's back to normal. So what is left for Ramp? Well, I'm afraid to say, to have any sort of impact in any sort of battle with Ramp now, all it really can do, not even needs to do, is go search for fish. Say, like for instance, this one pike right here. I found that, I'll eat it, and now I'll end up getting 20% bonus stamina recovery. But because it's a fish, I can also use fishy breath in order to share it with any group members. So that's cool. You know, you just follow your friends around like a little buffing drone, and then you can give them a bunch of buffs. Okay. And then outside of, you know, following people around, burping on them with a fishy breath, then you can also just become an accessory to any big thing and just buff their damage by 20% using Plotting Whispers. That is all the Ramp can do at this point in any fight. That's actually, you know, semi-effective. The only reason I say semi-effective is because, sure, you know, you've buffed them up, you've given them buffs, they are stronger. That's the key word there. They are stronger. That doesn't mean that they're better. If they still go in and they die because they messed up and made a mistake, well, can't blame the Ramp. It was the person he buffed who made the mistake. And with this, you know, we're all the way up to this patch now, and Ramp is kind of lost all agency, you know, to have an effect in any sort of fight. Nothing is in the Ramp's hands. If it had hands. But what would I change? But without saying, oh, I just want Ramp to be godly strong. Well, I would want Scav Picker to work almost like the Sliced debuff. In other words, if you notice with Sliced, like from Spino or Deinonychus, whenever you hit someone with it, or you get hit with it, and it starts to fall off, you know, the timer gets low, but you've got multiple stacks of it on you. It doesn't all fall off at once, right? It decays one stack at a time. That is what I would love to see on Scav Picker. Have it just decay one stack at a time. You can keep it at 5 seconds per stack if you want, I don't mind. It just means, you know, I gotta do a little bit more work, I've gotta keep managing my stamina, I gotta put a little bit of effort in. But that actually sounds pretty engaging. You know, it's something for the Ramp to do, something for the Ramp to actually, you know, have an effect with. So that's my 2 cents. I went on way longer about Ramp than I should have, or than would normally be necessary. But I thought that if you didn't actually get the full story, well, how would you really be able to go at it, really? You know, look at it, and maybe even rationalize it. But that is just how it is right now. I'm still gonna try and make it work in some way or another, but God, it's limiting. It's very limiting. Oh well. And so here we are at the end. I am surprised how long my talk about Ramp actually went, mainly because I end up doing all of my videos in like chunks of like 3 to 5 minutes at a time. I just didn't keep count. Now, I don't like being too negative, okay? Negativity in anything is necessary, but as long as you're constructive with it, of course. That's kind of what I've tried to be. I don't know if it came across as constructive. I did my best to, and I mean, outside of Ramperinkus, I would say 95 or, you know, almost 99% of this patch, I loved it. I love this patch. Spino's amazing, looks amazing, I love the kit. The animations are amazing. The balance changes are balance changes. I guess you know, whenever I see a balance change, I see it as an opportunity for people to try something new. Okay, I don't necessarily always just say, oh, this is good or this is bad. I also do think that, hey, maybe try something else. You can find out something else that you may enjoy, and then that'll get changed, and then that'll, you know, you can try and find something else that you might enjoy after that. But yeah, you know how it goes. That's enough rambling from me. I've done enough of that for today, and my throat is very sore. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye.